Welcome back. We're going to look at another informal letter, this one with a different theme as well as a different purpose. We're trying to look at a variety of themes as well as purposes, just so that you have a variety of vocabulary, so that you have as much preparation as possible before exam day. Last month you had an overseas holiday with some friends where you stayed at their house. They have just sent you some photos. Write a letter to your friends. In your letter, thank them for the holiday and the photos, explain why you didn't write earlier, and invite them to come and stay with you. So there's a few things going on here. Let's try and find them all by highlighting or underlining the key words. We may want to reference the fact that it was last month. This does not need to be a big part of the letter at all, but we may just want to reference it. Might not come up, but it could be important to add there. It was an overseas holiday. Notice it was in a different country. Again, this is something we might be able to reference within the letter itself. So some friends, again indicating the fact that we're looking at an informal letter. And we stayed at their house. We didn't go all together to a hotel, but we stayed at the friend's house, and they've just sent us some photos. Not one photo, but some photos. All of these little details are very important. Now we've got quite a few different things that we need to do. We need to thank them. Well, what are we thanking them for? Not one thing, but two things. For the holiday itself and for sending the photos. We need to explain why we didn't write earlier. I think we can just highlight all of that really. And we need to invite them to stay. So there's quite a lot going on here, and it's very, very easy for people to hit about 70, 80, 90% of the task directives, but not 100%. A lot of people miss out on it, on finding everything, but we really need to refer back particularly to everything within those bullet points and making sure that we're accurate in the information that we provide, that information being up here in the task itself. That's why that underlining of keywords is vital. And to help us make sure that we stay on track, let's write the plan. We know it's an informal letter. What is generally the main purpose of this letter? Seems to me it's a thank you letter. There is an invitation, but it comes at the end, so it's not the main purpose. We wouldn't write about the invitation in the purpose sentence. In the purpose sentence, we would probably talk about thanking the recipient. So let's plan. And again, as always, we're going to split these up according to the bullet points. Now, something just to mention here, you don't have to follow the order of the bullet points in the task. You can swap them around if it seems logical to do so. There is no requirement to follow in this order, but most of the time it's written in that order because it makes the most sense. And we're going to keep to it here. So we're thanking them for the holiday and the photos. What details can we add here? Well, we of course just want to say thank you. So what else can we add? We can just talk about that we had, let's think about just some vocabulary. Let's say a lovely time. Very informal there, we had a lovely time. And we'll talk about maybe memories that have been preserved from the photos. So lovely time in the holiday and memories from the photos. We're referring to each of those important parts of the bullet point. In the next paragraph, we're explaining why we didn't write earlier. Maybe we got sick when we came home. So we became sick when we came home. Any more that we could write? It's always good if we could have two things just to bulk out the paragraph. We can think, how are we now? Are we better? Well, I say better now. We can turn that into a sentence as well. And in the fourth paragraph, we're inviting them to come and stay with you. What could we say about this? How about we first of all think of a time, maybe a season. How about winter? Winter may be a good time for them to come and visit. Why winter? Well, at the moment I'm living in London, and I happen to know that in winter, despite the weather, it can be a very nice time to visit London because of all of the Christmas decorations and the festivities. So let's just add that there. So a reason. Each of these points can become a sentence in itself, or at least a long clause. So let's leave that there. Remember, P1 will be the purpose sentence. And the purpose sentence can either be indicating the purpose, in which case a thank you, or if it's an informal letter, you can just write a general hope you're well or hope things are okay. That doesn't indicate the purpose. It's just something that's very natural to write. Depends on what you feel is most appropriate for that letter. There isn't a right answer and a wrong answer here. Sometimes you might want to write hope you're well and then leave the purpose for the second paragraph. Sometimes you might want to jump straight into it. You should take it on a case-by-case basis and see how you feel. Now for this one, I'm going to go for the former option and just write the sort of hope you're well start. Before we get there, we need to write a name. Now, be very careful. A lot of people will just write something like this and then carry on. Seems fine. It's informal. It's a short form of Timothy. What's the problem here? Well, the problem is that we have a plural up here and we have a plural here. Write a letter to your friends. We're writing to multiple people. Now, we don't need to write lots of names. Let's just imagine there are two. Maybe it's a married couple. Dear Tim and Janet, let's say. And as I said, I'm going to follow this up with just a general, it's very typical for an informal letter, starting with checking in on them, seeing how they're doing. And notice here, I should, you might think, need a subject. I hope you're. But when we're in an informal letter, we often omit the subject because we are trying to condense the language. It's understood that we're talking about I, and so we can drop that there and jump straight into hope, straight into the verb. So hope you're doing well. You could write that. Yeah, that's decent. Let's show off a little bit of vocabulary here though. We want to make it relevant to the topic. The topic is holiday, by the way. So the theme is a holiday. How about this? Something like this. Hope you're coping okay with the post-holiday blues. So nothing too sophisticated, but at the same time very advanced vocabulary. So that kind of feeling of lowness, that feeling of sadness that you get when you come back from a holiday, that's the post-holiday blues. Now notice I've got a question mark at the end here. It doesn't close off the sentence. It actually opens it up for them to reply and refer back to it when they want to write back. So we can do that. You can actually just say, hope you're coping okay with the post-holiday blues. You might even write it with an exclamation mark to be sort of humorous about it, but I'm going to add a question mark here to indicate that we'd like to hear back from them as well on this subject. So then let's move on to the next paragraph, and we haven't written about the purpose yet. So if we don't do it in the first paragraph, we need to make sure we do it straight away in the second paragraph, immediately. So let's jump straight into it. Just writing to say, very quickly, we know we're about to write what we want to write. What is the purpose? We're wanting to say thank you. Now we can turn that into a noun. Say a big thanks. We're writing to say a big thanks. You might think big is an adjective that is not complex enough, but notice that around the language will be much more sophisticated or at least advanced vocabulary. So not every word has to be super advanced. With an informal letter, it's totally natural to see a big thanks. A big thanks, why? For, first of all, let's just be clear, for sending those photos over. That's one thing we're thanking them for, and then we have to thank them for the holiday as well. In general, you know, just the whole thing together. So it's very important. Just writing to say a big thanks for sending those photos over as well as for the holiday in general. So let's close that off there. The purpose very clearly indicated right at the beginning of that second paragraph. So we've got here, lovely time, memories. Let's just jump straight into it. Don't overthink it. I had, past tense, showing our ability there. I had such a lovely time. Nice and informal, very expressive. We're emphasizing. We have the memories here. So, and it, let's say it really means a lot to have those memories in picture form. Yeah, maybe that could work in picture form. I'm going to use captured in the pictures. There's nothing overly formal about the verb captured. It could be used at a formal setting, could be used in an informal setting, so that's okay. Again, we have that little comma here just because we're changing the subject from I to it. It really means a lot to have those memories captured in the pictures. Okay, nice and simple. So we'll move on to the next paragraph. And we're looking at why we didn't write earlier. So sometimes quite a few tasks in IELTS, particularly with the informal letters and the semi-formal ones, they ask you to explain why you didn't write any sooner. And a nice way to start these paragraphs is to go with something like this. I would have written sooner. So you're using nice conditional language here. I would have written sooner if I had done this, etc. But we're going to leave that part out. And then we've got a contraction as well. Would have, would have. I would have, and then we've got the past participle written. I would have written sooner. Let's take that out. But unfortunately, I would have written sooner, but unfortunately, I must have... one way to talk about becoming sick, particularly if we're talking about like a stomach illness, we can say that we have picked up a bug, so some sort of bacterial infection has been giving us grief. So I must have picked up a bug, maybe where? Like, very common place to pick up a bug, so many people around, on the plane. Now notice, again, we're using that definite article because we know that the recipient knows which plane we're talking about, the plane that took us home. And you don't need to say our plane or my plane, informal, you say the plane. I must have picked up a blah, blah. Why do we think that? Because I've been battling, a nice verb here, it gives us a nice sort of image, battling a stomach illness ever since I got back. Could do a full stop, could do an exclamation mark here. Again, it just adds a little bit of lightness to the letter. We don't want them to worry too much about us. We can see that it's got an element of humour to it. Now, there's one part of this sentence which I would like to improve. I wonder if you can find, you can pause the video here if you like, I wonder if you can find where you might be able to add a contraction. It's not an obvious location. I wonder if you can find it. Let's have a look. It's actually here. What we can do is contract those two words to say must have. I must have picked up a bug. Don't worry too much about that. That's one of those non-obvious locations, those opportunities that often get missed. So it's not too important, but it's just good to acknowledge that you can turn that into a contraction. I must have picked up a bug on the plane because I've been battling a stomach illness ever since I got back. Notice the range of tenses here as well. We're changing the times here and there. We've got this, we've got would have, we've got must have, we've got I've been, and then since I got back as well. So lots of things going on. Now what else have we got? We've got better now. So let's carry on with the second sentence. We want to say that we're better. A nice way to do that with an idiom. So an idiom, picked up a bug. Another idiom for getting better is I'm on the mend. So not that we are better, but that we're getting better. So I think I'm on the mend now. But let's just refer back to it. But it was a nasty few days. We want to basically do more to explain why we haven't written. So let's do that here. And I was so weak, I could barely pick up a pen. So we could just write that. So we want to express that we couldn't have written any sooner because we just didn't have the energy. So yeah, we're putting that in here. I was so weak I could barely pick up a pen. You can just add a that in here as well. I was so weak that I could barely pick up a pen. But again, you can omit that. It's perfectly fine. It's often the way with the word that it can be omitted and it still makes sense. I was so weak I could barely pick up a pen. Now we can move on to the final paragraph. So we want to change direction here, really. We're moving from an explanation and a thank you to an invitation. And when we want to change direction this dramatically, we can say something like this. Anyway, don't worry about that. Let's talk about something else. That's what the purpose of anyway. Some people will use anyway. They'll use it completely incorrectly. But that is how you use anyway, to say, don't worry about that, let's talk about something else. Anyway, I want to invite you to where I am. How can we say that? Well, a good way to transition would be to say, I'd love to repay your generosity. This again references back to the fact that we are thanking the couple. The purpose of this letter is a thank you letter. We refer to that by talking about repaying the generosity. So, and it's a nice collocation as well. You repay generosity. Repay your generosity, how? By hosting you two, you guys, we can say you guys, just informal, colloquial. Janet's a woman, obviously, but we say you guys in this way. You guys, and let's bring in the ideas here. This winter, again, let's bring in a conditional, if you're free for a visit. Now, what you can do here is a full stop. But again, if we add a question mark here, it's opening it up for them to reply, are you free for a visit? We don't need to use the inversion and say, are you free? But it's like, if you're free, you can imagine if you were saying it, that the intonation would rise because we're asking a question. It's okay to do that here. So if you're free for a visit, and then we want, why are we inviting them over winter? Well, London can be just fabulous. So a nice adjective can be just fabulous around this time of year, December basically, around December, with all the festivities, let's say with all the Christmas decorations. And we will use that word festivities, but we'll turn it into the adjective. The festive what? See if you can think of what I'm writing. The festive, apparently I'm not able to spell, let's try that again. The festive atmosphere, So the festive atmosphere, nice collocation sort of coming through here, just very natural vocabulary being used. So what have we got? We have a word count now of 137. So we will need to add this kind of last line that will first of all help us to reach the 150 word count minimum, but will also help to close off the letter in a polite, chatty, informal way. Let's use that old favourite just. So just do this for me. Just do that for me. Simply, no effort, just let me know. Just let me know if you fancy it. Again, that magic if, helping to improve the grammatical complexity of the letter. And then what will happen? Just let me know if you fancy it, and we'll all together, the three of them all together, this is a nice way of saying that we'll choose a date, we'll get something in the calendar. We'll get something in the calendar. We will arrange a date for it to happen. We will arrange a date for it to happen, semi-formal, formal. We'll get something in the calendar. This lovely, almost idiomatic, but not quite, informal language. And then we can close it off. And we'll say best, it's fine, Mark, or whatever. Again, just your first name is appropriate. So there's a letter about a holiday. There's a letter that expresses the purpose of thanking the recipient in an informal tone. And if you have any questions about this letter, as always, please post them in the Q&A. But I'll leave you now to do the gap fill exercise, and I will see you in the next letter lecture.